All right, we've got one more presentation to bring us home today. So this is a tag team effort with Carly Russell from Montana DEQ and Tim Matthews from Montana DEQ. Carly Russell holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Biology from Eastern Washington University. Carly has worked for the open cut mining section of DEQ for over 5 years, where she helped implement drone utilization. Prior to working for DEQ, she worked for the Forest Service in Phillipsburg as a rangeland management technician. Tim Matthews holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Geochemistry from Michigan State University and a Master of Science in Geology from the University of Wyoming. Tim has worked for the hard rock mining section of DEQ since 2022. He has previously worked as a well site geologist in the oil and gas industry from 2012 to 2021. Please welcome Carly and Tim.
Right, thank you for having us here today. The purpose of this presentation is to show how we've been able to implement the utilization of drones, increase our safety, compliance, and be more efficient. So like Dan said, I hold a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Biology from Eastern Washington University. Also gained some life experience studying environmental engineering at Montana Tech. I worked for the Forest Service prior to coming to DEQ.
Oh no. And I'm Tim. I work in the hard rock mining section. I'm currently the only drone pilot in the hard rock mining section right now.
So just to give a little overview of our agency, we're kind of broken out into several different divisions. Where the Mining Bureau is housed is we're in the Air, Energy, and Mining Division, and then our Mining Bureau consists of coal, hard rock, open cut, and then a section called Field Services and Technology.
So on the screen in front of you is the regulatory responsibility of the hard rock mining program on the left, Field Services and Technology on the right, just to give you an idea of what we are expected to regulate in the state, what we need to regulate. The hard rock mining program has 79 operating permits with 190 individual project areas. These have to be inspected by statute annually, and by rule, some of these larger permits have to be inspected 3 times a year. Field Services and Technology include small minor exclusion statements and exploration licenses. These have fewer inspection schedules by the statute. We do need to inspect them on a as-needed basis here. So we have a lot of sites. It's not just Montana Resources. If you can see in this area here, we have a lot of dimensional stone, riprap, decorative stone, those sorts of things. Small sites, dispersed sites, all over the place, just a few acres, and we need to be there every year.
So our coal program, there is 11 permits that regulates 89,000 acres. The majority of it is in south central Montana, and then we have one little area up here near Savage. The open cut mining program, which is the program that I work in, we administer around 1,700 permits that cover 75,000 acres, and as you can see, we pretty much touch everywhere in Montana. So what does that mean? Means we have a large area that we regulate. We have over 2,000 permits, and we regulate over 250,000 acres across the state of Montana. This is a map of every single permit that the Mining Bureau holds. So a little bit about our drone history. We started in 2013 with the director's office. Our archaeologist found a great use for a drone for help assisting in his pedestrian surveys. He started out with a DJI Phantom 2 Vision Pro, which is the top one there. And then our SMES X-Flow program, along with Hard Rock, in 2018, bought a Mavic and a Phantom 3. In 2019, Open Cut program, we decided to go all in We bought 3 Phantom 4 drones, which is the bottom one here, and we never looked back. So currently, our present day use, we have 15 FAA certified pilots within our mining bureau. Our fleet consists of 5 DJI Phantom 4 Pros, 1 DJI Mavic, which is the top black one, and then we have a fixed wing drone that we just got at the end of the summer last year, which is called a Wingtra Gen 2, and that was purchased by Cole. The software that we utilize is the DJI Go 4 app. We have been testing the Esri Air Hub portal, which is kind of a new thing that they just rolled out at the Dev Summit this last year for Esri. And the Pix4D software is software that we rely heavily on. It helps us with our flight planning and our post-processing. We also use the Wingtra flight planning software. Obviously, by the name, it's exclusive for the Wingtra. This is one of my favorite maps. All these blue dots represent every imagery that we have collected over from between 2019 and 2024. You can see that we're not really exclusive to a certain portion of the state, and I think it's just a great representation of how we've been able to utilize it in the last 5 years. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. Okay, so a little bit, just a slight high-level view of UAV photogrammetry. So basically, the drone takes pictures. It flies along a flight pattern, taking a picture along its path. Then we put it into our processing software, which is Pix4D, and then it stitches those photos together. It finds similar things in each photo and is able to stitch them together. What's produced is an ortho photo, and then it's also a 3D model or a digital surface model, which you can see in the bottom of the screen. Our 3D models are uploaded to the Pix4D cloud, which is then we're allowed to utilize it. We send links to our scientists, and then our scientists are able to go in there, make measurements, and we're going to kind of touch base on all of those things that we do in Pix4D.
So I want to go briefly over how we're able to increase safety from this. I'm assuming with this crowd here, many of you have taken an MSHA course or 2 in your days. You all know that how dangerous mountain sites are. We have a lot going on in this picture here, and UAV imagery can help our scientists avoid some of these obvious hazards. Obviously, we've got high wall hazards. Up here in the very top, you can see one of our scientists, maybe a little bit close to that high wall, but this is something that we need to inspect. This is something that we need to measure. We are required to measure these things in order to make sure we have enough bond for sites. So a better way to maybe look at a high wall rather than trying to measure it from the top is getting a 3D model of it. Instead of walking around it with a GPS unit, trying to measure the length of it, now we put it into a computer and we click once, click up here, click down here, twice, bang. There's your angle. There is your high wall height. It's 33.9 degrees, done in seconds, what may have been done in, I don't know, hours back in the day. There are other sorts of hazards. Here we have water hazards and high wall hazards. This is a picture of the Montana Tunnels mine. That concludes my comments on this slide. You've taken an MSHA course. Do you know that one of the most common causes of death on a mine site is drowning? You don't want to be near these water features, especially if you are inspecting by yourself. Avoid these. A drone can go out there and inspect the stuff for you. We have difficult and unstable terrain on our site. Here's a Smith site over in Plains, Montana. You're either going to be going up these pretty difficult roads here in a state vehicle, or you're going to be walking. Probably both are not exactly the safest thing for you to do. Much better to stand down here with a drone and let it capture as much of the site as you can for you. Similarly, here's an open cut site in Glendive. Similar hazards out here. Then there's large project areas. Some of you were in Butte with us yesterday. Here's a 340-acre mine site. This is a coal mine in East Decker, Montana. If you were going to inspect this thing, you've got a few options. One, you've got to walk. I mean, I haven't gotten a desk job in the last 2 years. I love getting my steps in as much as the next guy, but come on. The other thing you can do is take a ride in a vehicle. Now you're on haul roads. Now you've got heavy equipment all around you. So also a little bit hazardous as well. What has been done many times is to inspect these things from helicopter. Kind of pricey. This kind of provides us a way to get around all of those things, the best of all worlds. And of course, it's not coal mines and hard rock mines that are limited to large mine sites. Here's a 345-acre open cut site near Billings. So these things can get big as well. And then there's heavy equipment. Look at everything that's going on in this open cut site. We've got 1, 2, 3 loaders, we've got semis, we got water haulers, and as DEQ employees, we are required to inspect things like this stockpile right there. Do you want your employees or your fellow employees to be walking around this thing trying to measure it? Probably not a good place to be. You know where I'd rather be in this site? The muster area. Thank you. Best place to be, a safe place to be, and you're out of, the operator's way. So moving out of safety, let's talk about how we are using this stuff to ensure compliance here, right? I'll let Carly start this part.
So one of the great things that we can do is we can do stockpile volumetric measuring. Typically, we look at some stockpiles on site. We don't necessarily need to measure every single one. Sometimes it just kind of gives us a good idea of what's going on at the site. We're probably more interested in measuring soil stockpiles to ensure that there is enough soil for reclamation. But this is this one was just really easy. So this is actually a 3D image of a mine material stockpile on site. I was able to click around. You just click around the base of the stockpile. You say calculate volume, and then it gives you a volume difference of 18,000 cubic yards. This is all done in a matter of seconds once we have processed all of the imagery. I can string together multiple stockpiles. This is a set of, we'll call it 4, maybe 5. And then I can tell that there was about 11,000 cubic yards of material there. We can also calculate volumes removed. So here was an area up near Polson. Didn't necessarily need to know how much volume had been removed, but it was just a good QA/QC between us and the operator to ensure that they are within compliance of their permit. And then you can see that they have removed, can't read my slide, I'm sorry. It's about 30,000 cubic yards of material. So like Tim discussed earlier, determining high wall dimensions is also something that is really important. It's part of your permit. You have to remain in length and height that's specified in the permit. This is a site in Missoula County, and it was a big high wall. So we flew the site with the drone, and you can see my yellow line, which is my 2 clicks that Tim was talking about. That gave me the elevation difference, which was a 40-foot high wall. And then that red line is the high wall length, which I don't have in the slide, which I think was probably about 250 feet.
So to go on a little bit more with these 3D models we have here that are created, here's an example of how we can go back to imagery that we had previously collected. It's good to have this on file. This can save you another inspection trip out to site, which is huge, right? It's sitting there. It's on the computer. You have a record now. In this case, we had a landowner that was concerned that groundwater had been intercepted by a dimensional stone operation. And what we can do with our 3D model is we can look at this water here. the 3D models, photogrammetry is not great with water, right? Basically, it all comes down to if you can see the bottom, you can measure the bottom. If it's cloudy, if you can't see the bottom, it really can't do much with that. We can see the bottom on this though, and therefore we know approximately where it is. So what do we do to answer this question of whether groundwater has been intercepted here? Click, go to this drainage down here, click, and now seconds later we have a 3D model. Here you can see the benches. We have 2 benches going down to the bottom of this pit here, up over a berm, and then here's the stream down here. This is probably not groundwater, and now we have something that we can quickly get back to the landowner with, saving us a trip out to site. One of the most basic things and one of the most important things that we have to do in this section, though, doesn't even require 3D models at all. This is just basic calculations of disturbance areas. Knowing how much disturbance on a site has a tremendous effect on things like the bond, whether an operation can be considered a small minor or not, that kind of thing. How would we used to do this? You send somebody out there, they have a GPS unit, they walk around the disturbance. 250,000 acres of Montana. Probably not possible. What we can do now is fly a drone, about 4 acres a minute is what we can map at. Come back to the office, click around, and now we have an exact defensible record of how much disturbance is on a site. And once we have that, we can compare this to other information. We can compare this to things like permit boundaries. On the left here, we have a disturbance that is outside of the permit boundary. Same on the right, we had maybe an operator got a little bit carried away with pushing this waste rock pile. I guess we're not supposed to say waste rock anymore. But this is a huge time saver for us because some of our most frequent violations are too much disturbance or disturbance that's in the wrong spot. And in the past, what our scientists experienced was they would find that there'd be too much disturbance or disturbance in the wrong spot. They take a few photos, they go home, they get back to the operator, and then we have a whole debate on what was seen and what was not seen and what are the conditions on the site and what's not the conditions on the site. This eliminates that conversation. And I don't think it's because we're going in there and we're going to, hit them with a sledgehammer, right? I think it's because our operators see that we've done the work, that we're not going to waste their times with any kind of spurious claims, that we're not going to come to them with a violation unless we have evidence of that violation here. And so it's been a tremendous time saver for not just us, but our operators too. And here's how we can communicate that in our inspection reports. We've got permit boundaries. We have areas that are outside of a permitted disturbance area. And of course, maps and 3D models aren't just the only imagery we get out of this. Some of the most important imagery I think we get is these oblique images, overviews of a site. We've already seen a lot of these today. People love to use these to explain things because they're very good at explaining things and they're very good at getting everybody on the same page. And it's even better when you can go back in and sort of write over this and annotate what's happening on a site.
So we thought it would be great to demonstrate how we've had communications with our operators in 2023. In gray is our administrative violations, which by definition is kind of your paperwork and your fee violations, which don't necessarily need a site inspection to determine if there's a violation or not. The orange represents, or I guess let's start with the blue. The blue represents violations that we sent without referencing UAV imagery, and then the orange shows us sending violation letters referencing UAV imagery. In hard rock mining and small miners in X-Flow, you can see that it was 29% to 24%. In open cut, it was, if you take out the administrative violations, it's about 95% of the time that we will send a violation letter referencing UAV imagery, and 5% of the time not not reference UAV imagery. One of my favorite things that we've been able to do with our UAV imagery that we've been able to collect is we've been able to do some 3D printing of the site that we have flown. So on the right-hand side, left-hand side, sorry. On the left-hand side, we had lots of back and forth discussions with an operator about which way water was going to flow off of the site. It was determined that the water was going to definitely flow to the northeast corner of the site, and we were able to print a 3D model to really be able to show that, yes, the water is going to flow this way. And then just to see how it would look and kind of demonstrate what we can do with 3D printing, we exaggerated it 2-to-1 so that that dip looked a little bit more dramatic to just ensure that, yes, water really is going to flow that way. The site on the other side of the screen was just a fun site for us. It was pretty neatly laid out. There was a lot of stockpiles. If anybody would like to see these 3D models, I have them over here on the table, so feel free to come take a look at them. So we've also been able, like Tim was saying, be more defensible in our enforcement and litigation. This is a site in Montana where there was concern that the open cut site was going to affect groundwater. So on the orange line, I was able to do an elevation profile, and you can see where the active mine area is, the berm at the site, the plain, the canal, and the creek. So by doing some simple math, subtracting 4961 and taking away 4905, you can see that there is going to be about a 60-foot difference.
There was talk earlier about how we may have gotten behind on some of our bonds at some point, right? In particular with Montana tunnels. And a big part of getting caught up with those and making sure that they're accurate is having defensible, scientific measurements of the condition on site. And here's an example where we use this 3D imagery for a bond. An operator came into possession of a tailings pond up here, and we had to bond for the removal of the water in that tailings pond. What is the consistency of that water? What is it? Is it briny? Is it full of heavy metals? Not sure. Depending on whether you can land apply it or not, that's going to get very, very expensive to dispose of that water. Our philosophy now, I'd say, is that we cannot be underbonded. We cannot leave ourselves in a position that we are underbonded. So if we don't know the quantity of water in there, then we are going to assume a maximal quantity. That is, this thing is as deep as it can be until you tell me otherwise. However, one of our scientists recalled that earlier this year he had taken some drone imagery of this. And our 3D models, not great at water. You probably can't get a bathymetric map of this. You can see a rock though. And if there is a rock that dropped into this pond and it can see it, you can get a point on the bottom of this thing, which is what we're seeing here. This is the bottom of the image. We've taken our camera and gone underneath that 3D model, right? And we're able to see a bottom of this pond and get a maximal depth. Is this very precise? No. Is this a realistic volume for what we are dealing with? Yes. And we are now in the process of calculating that bond, and hopefully we'll be able to give something that's reduced from, again, a maximal calculation to that particular operator. We're also using this in bond release. Here is an example of an operator that wanted to release this land here, right? And there's several different steps that we need for reclamation to be complete on a waste rock, not a waste rock, pile, such as this one. One is grading, another is laying of soil, and the third is revegetation. This particular operating plan required a 2.5 to 1 grade on it. Before, we might spend some time walking around the site, taking elevation measurements, SOHCAHTOA, all of that good stuff. Now, click, click, right? 20.3 degrees. Good job, guys. You did it. And I can do this on the entire thing in a matter of seconds now. The other thing that really helps us with is vegetation work. Now, this needs to be collaborated. You know, this isn't a replacement for on-site investigations. We need to know what's growing there. We need to make sure that there are no noxious weeds there or anything like that. But what we can't get from those kinds of investigations is a general overview of how much of this is vegetated. Is this well vegetated enough for us to release? And if we compare this vegetated area right here to, let's say, this undisturbed ground over here, now we have a very good qualitative, granted, but a qualitative estimate of whether this has been vegetated enough to be released from bond.
So additionally, in bond and liability releases, we were able to go out to sites and fly them and come back to the office and put them into our what we call our web mapping application, where we have permit boundaries. When I was on site, I said, oh, look at these stockpiles. I don't think they're really required, or they're not permitted to have stockpiles remaining at the site. Get back to the office and realize that, well, yeah, their permit area in blue looks great, but they also made some disturbance outside of their permit boundary. So that was a separate discussion with the operator. On the other site is very similar situation. You can see that there is disturbance outside of the blue lines, which caused us to go back and say, well, it doesn't look like your site's ready for release, and we probably need to have some other discussions. So this is something, I know we're running short on time, I just want to show this really quick. I think this is something that just got brought to my attention. For archaeology, we had an operator call us, say, hey, I think we found some archaeological features out here. Can you come fly the drone and take a look? So that's a site overview. Right here, you're kind of a little bit more zoomed in, can't really see anything yet. This is all based off of the imagery that we got from the drone. Well, you can start seeing a lot of, I want to call them TP rings, but I know that's probably not the right term for them right now. So therefore, we were able to go back in, and they found, I think, 11 different TP rings in this area. So the operation was then stopped and reclaimed in order to retain those artifacts. So just quickly going into efficiency, pre-drone utilization, we were able to inspect mostly open cut specific 96 to 132 sites a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, or it does sound like a lot, but once we started using drones, we were able to see 240 sites in a year. When you administer 1,700 permits, that's a nice jump. And here you can just see our increase in efficiency. Any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with some of the concern coming out with the Chinese products, with the TikTok ban, and, some of the federal agencies already going with the blue list for UAVs. Are you guys going to be moving more towards that as time goes on?
Yes, we've been directed by the governor's office, I believe it is. Dan, you can correct me if that's not quite, I think, or maybe state IT, to start moving away from our DJI products. The problem is trying to find a viable solution that's up to industry standards without having to spend an exorbitant amount of money to replace our fleet. So we're looking at like a 3 to 5 year replacement plan on the drones that we have.
I've got 2 questions.
Yes.
First, what is your resolution in your models that you're getting out of photogrammetry?
Ooh, I don't know off the top of my head. It's pretty good. In the very beginning, we jokingly have something that we called the jerky bag test, because that's what we had in the field with us. We placed a jerky bag on the ground, and we did several different flights at several different elevations, and found that between 250 and almost 400 feet, it was about the same resolution, which was good enough for us. I mean, you could still see in like the cab of the whatever equipment was on site.
Okay. Second question, you said about you were measuring the amount that was removed, but you really weren't caring about that. So for open cut, you're not trying to do any kind of production verification with their annual reporting to see if they're being accurate in that?
Sometimes we are, but sometimes it's also really hard on open cut sites to tell what was mined that year versus what's just been stockpiled on site.
I just had a quick question about accessibility on private property. Do you still have to get approval to fly over, or if you're on a public property, can you fly over private and complete your inspections without having to go through all that?
Usually we have the landowner's permission, and I usually, and I think I can speak for the most of our scientists, is that we usually we'll get as close to the site as we can, if not on the site, and fly just the permit area and not try and fly over other people's personal property. Oh, got one in the back.
We're at. Thank you.
You're obviously making a lot of area and volumetric measurements, slopes, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the jerky bag test. Depending on the drone setup, what are you using for horizontal and vertical control on site? I kept thinking the little red dot was your ground control.
Sorry.
But every photo was kind of placed in a spot that made sense, but I didn't see any other ones. Are you having like permanent, are you using the mine's permanent ground control points, or how are you dealing with your XYZ accuracy?
So for most of the work that we do, we don't need like ground control points. There was a special project out in Fairview where there was a highway realignment that we worked with MDT on, and we did use ground control points for that one. But usually we get within 4 to 6 inches of accuracy for what we're doing. That's good enough.
Are you running with RTK or
I don't believe we're using RTK. I'm not, I'll have to double check on that. I can't remember. Nope.
All right, come on over here.
Yeah.
All the way over here, Dan.
Right, so you're using the drone program for your required, for DEQ's required inspections. You're beginning to maybe start to catch up on what you're supposed to be able to inspect on an annual basis. But a lot of what you're doing sounds like also checking and what is otherwise self-reported from mine operators.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to work with the operators to schedule inspection so that they can benefit from this information without having to double up on it and do their own measurements.
Yep, so I want to preface that with under the Open Cut Mining Act, there's no statutory requirement for inspections. So we're technically not behind on inspections. But yes, we do work with the operator to let them know that we're going to be coming on site and that we are going to be using a drone. And we're happy to share out. We'll usually, if the operator requests, we'll share the orthophoto in the digital surface model with them, and that way they can use it as well.
And I'd also like to say, as things might be more difficult for us with this move from drones made overseas to maybe drones made here, it would be great to see our operators put this in place themselves. I'd love to see reclamation work applied for with the evidence of a 3D model attached for it. I think that would be a great opportunity for our operators to show compliance without having us to go out there and, maybe we find a few other things while we're flying at that point.
Yeah, I will say we have, at least in Open Cut, we have had several of our bigger operators go out and purchase their own drones and produce their own flights, and we will, take some of that data in too if they're willing to share it with us, just how we're willing to share with them.
All right, any last questions today? Great, thanks, Carly and team. Oh, did I miss one? Thanks. These questions are stationed as far apart as they can get.
Getting your steps in.
I was just going to ask, what's been your experience with, was it Esri that's just rolled out, the flight planning software, and how have you liked that?
Oh,
Man, so I don't know if there's a lot of drone pilots in here, but filing for LANCE authorizations, so if you're flying within a special airspace, usually around airports or in the bigger cities, LANCE authorizations were a really big pain, and this really helps the system. It's very automated. It can tie into our state accounts. So I haven't done it yet, but we're supposed to be able to easily have all of our permit boundaries and stuff in this. So for flight planning, if we go towards flight planning with the software, we don't have to import any extra permit boundaries. We're already going to be able to see it and then plan our flight from there.
I think there's a question in the parking lot. I'll be right back. So. All right. Well, thanks, Tim and Carly. Appreciate it.
thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.